All right, so as the directions show, step by step for the eye. Now, when completing the eye, draw the circle shape lightly of the iris first. Okay. Now, whether you do it on this, if you print out this, or you just do it in your sketchbook, that's fine. So again, we're dealing with the true shape. So again, you're going to be working from the reference photo that you took on your Lenovo device. Okay. And that gives you the opportunity to zoom in. So for example, if I start here on my left eye, all right, I want to look at the true shape. So I can see that that's a circle. Part of it's covered by the upper eyelid. And that's exactly what the first part of the directions say. Draw the circle shape lightly of the iris first. Notice that the shape of the iris is a perfect circle, but its top is obscured by the upper eyelid. And a little bit, depending on how you're looking at it, a little bit of the bottom of the iris is obscured by the bottom eyelid. So let's start off now. Zoom out here. Okay, so I've got my eye here. This is the one that I'm doing. And I'm just going to do this one on this one page here of my sketchbook. I'm going to do it big. So if I look at the size of the eye, I want to establish that perfect circle first. It's again, I'm just holding my pencil lightly and I'm just trying to get that shape of the iris. Light blocking lines. Okay? All right. Now, I want to look at the width. How much further from here and from here? Now that's this part here and here. All right, the darkest part of the iris. If you notice, if you look closely at the iris, there's a darkness around the iris, right? There's almost a black line around the iris, okay? You can look here and see how much of the iris is covered by the upper eyelid line. So now what I want to do is I want to look at how much further over from the edge of the iris is the curved part, right? This part here, this little edge of the eye. I can look and I can see that it's not that far over. It's kind of like right in here. So maybe from there, what I could do is I could give myself the width of the eye. So from here to here. All right, so I look, there's a little bit of white on this side. So I'm going to put that, just a couple little blocking points there to help define the width of the eye. All right. Okay, so now that I've got that, I've got the distance from the iris to the corner of the eye, which is this part right here. I'm going to establish this shape right here. Okay. So I go in from there and I can just look. You can see this is kind of where we're talking about like the tear duct shape. See, that kind of comes down, but then comes back up. I made it too high. So then what do? I'll just move it down a little bit. So if I look, this is what I was talking about, the bottom of the iris is just touching the bottom eyelid. So that means edge is going to be here, and the curve is going to be here. All right. Now, this is what we were talking about. How much of the circle, if this circle continued here, how much of that is covered? So this would be halfway, so just above halfway. So if this is halfway, just above here and here. Now, the next part of the assignment says to look for the shape of that upper eyelid. All right, so after you get the shape, start to draw the shape of the upper eyelid. Don't forget the inside corner shape, which is what we just established right there. Then the light outline of the lower eyelid thickness. We'll get to that in a minute. All right, so now, what's this shape right here? And that's kind of coming from here. How much of the eyelid is covered? I already have that marked right here. And I have the width. You can see it kind of comes down rather sharply. Okay? So that's just the upper eyelid. Now, what I was talking about as far as the thickness of the lower eyelid, this is important. Right here, you see that little bit of a shadow? Little shadow right there, there's a little shadow right here. The bottom eyelid, again, the bottom eyelid is a thickness, right? It has a thickness, it's a flap of skin. So that thickness is being picked up right here. So I can see that the thickness, so I look at the shape that's created, and I look at how much, where the edge of the bottom eyelid is, oops, where the edge of the bottom eyelid is from here. Okay, it's right about here because part of it's covering. Now look at the lid, the upper eyelid. You see the distance between the upper eyelid shape right here and where the bottom eyelid meets? It doesn't meet at a point. And that's a common mistake students make. It doesn't meet at a point. The upper eyelid goes beyond the lower eyelid. So I start where that is, right? Here's the edge of the eyelid. I come in here and I look at the shape. Comes down. Covers a little bit of that part of the iris. And then curves in and down. And that's with my eye. Your eye might look significantly different. Now I look at where the edge of the white of the eye is, where it meets the fleshy part, and I can see that it's right about here. There's that. Now, this line is the inside line. Okay, the inside line there, where I was looking at the thickness of the lower eyelid, which means I need to bring a little bit of a line. It's getting the broken line here because it kind of comes up and flattens out. And there's a little bit of thickness right there. That's the thickness of the lower eyelid. So that's as far as I got so far here. Next, don't forget the inside corner shape, then the light outline of the lower eyelid thickness. Okay, that's the thickness, that gap between here and here. Now, start in the pupil, which is round, inside the iris, and indicate where the highlight on the eye will be. This gives the eye its light. So if I look at the reference, I look and see where the pupil is, and the pupil, of course, is the black part. Depending on the amount of light, it's always dead center. And depending on the amount of light or lack of light, the larger the pupil appears. So I can see that the top of the circle just hits the upper eyelid. So that means right here, I'm going to have another circle centered inside of this circle. And since there's a good amount of light in the reference, it's going to be, I don't know, 7/8 of the circle. And as I said, the iris itself has a little bit of a dark outline. So I can come back in and darken up the edge of the iris. Again, that's a perfect circle. All right. Now, if I look closely on this eye, I can see there's a highlight here, and a little bit of highlight here, and a little bit of a highlight on the iris, or on the pupil itself. So I'm going to draw that in. It's just a little circle on top of the pupil where there's a lighter value than the black. And then, of course, there's a little bit of one here. So I'm drawing a really broken reference to it here. And then same thing right over here. I can see a little bit of a light. Now, again, that's going to depend on how you photographed it. Okay? So you got to really, really be careful of that. Now, lower eyelid, upper eyelid. What's next? We've got to find next pupil. We did that. Start adding shading and detail. Keep the indication of the lower lid light and subtle. Make a few subtle lines to indicate eyelashes, not bicycle spokes. I'll talk about that in a minute. The upper lid will cast a gentle shadow on the eyeball. All right, so let's take a look at the rest of what we end up needing here as far as whether we have what we need or don't have what we need. The next thing we want to look at is the upper eyelid crease. It's right here. It's going to be different on each face, right? Mine is closer right around here. So if I look at it, I can see that it comes beyond the end of this. So it kind of comes to here. It's about this much higher and it's a little bit flatter here, and then kind of curves. And you can see it stops almost even with the corner. So right about here. Right there, and then it kind of has a little bit of a dip down. That's important, all right, that upper eyelid crease, because again, the eyelid is two parts. There's a lower eyelid and upper eyelid. So there's the upper eyelid crease. Now I got to look at the shading. And then I got to look at the eyebrow. Okay, upper eyebrow. A lot of times students will put the eyebrow like right here. They got to look at the distance between the crease and where the eyebrow is. And then look at where the eyebrow starts. All right, the eyebrow starts pretty much even with this. And don't draw the caterpillar eyebrow. Okay, so students will commonly draw the upper eyelid, and then they'll draw this caterpillar shape. All right, that is definitely not an eyebrow. If you establish, wow, it transferred, I had graphite on the other side. If you establish the shape of the eyebrow, okay, based on where it starts here, I'm just drawing some broken line. You can see how far away from this edge it comes all the way out here, okay, and then down. There's always that distance between. Now, when I go to put the eyebrow in, I'm looking at the shapes created. I have a nice sharp pencil, and it would just be several little lines, adding and subtracting pressure, different directions. Again, it's all individual hairs growing out of that part of the head. So that's how you want to represent it. You don't want to draw it as a solid shape, okay? We don't have caterpillar eyebrows. And of course, depending on the direction that they're going, add and subtract the hairs where they are. Even students, or in this case, girls will often do a little bit of a color underneath the hair to make it look thicker, okay? It's still, they're creating a shape. There's this template they're creating, but underneath that, they're just putting stuff below the hair on the skin to make it look a little bit fuller. In this case, just worry about where the hairs are, okay? Now, what I want to look at is, are there any other creases, right? You can see right here, you can see right here, there's a little crease in the lower eyelid. This area here, the eye socket, right, where the nose comes off of the face, that's just as important. So what I want to look at is, where's that line? Got a little bit of a line, that kind of value that kind of shows up here. And then I've got this shape that's kind of like creases, lower eyelid crease. Mine are a little bit more prominent because of age, and sun, and all those fun things, okay? But you can also see right here, got to look at that curve. So I got that curve shape, which is the bridge of my nose, and that's going to be where the values are going to start to be put in. So now if I look at the eye, got good strong structure. If I go in now and look at what I want to create as far as eyebrows go, and here's the common mistake students make when it comes to eyebrows or eyelashes. Hold on. Please don't do this. And I'm sure you're going to realize that once you look at this. Notice the upper eyelid, as I said, the upper eyelid goes beyond. That edge of the upper eyelid that goes beyond is usually where the lashes are, because in perspective, the lashes are coming towards you. So instead of doing, okay, here's my eyeball, here's my pupil, here's my highlight, this is what students will often do, because they think that's what's there. And that's not. Those are bicycle spokes. We do not want to deal with bicycle spokes. What we want to look at is, and what I normally say to students is, look at the lashes since they're coming towards you in perspective. All right, it would be like my fingers, right? You don't see the fingers going like this, right? The fingers are kind of coming towards you and they're bending. So in order to represent those individual hairs coming at you, what I suggest you think of is, think of a wing, like a bird's wing. Feathers, right? Depending on what you're looking at. In my case, I have very thin eyelashes, right? You can see there's just like a dark shape right here. Not much more than that. I don't have anything coming up in front of this eyelid. So even if you do have longer or thicker eyelashes, keep them more into this winged shape, okay? And as well, remember, you've got the thickness of the lower eyelid, so you might have a few, thickness of the lower eyelid, you might have a few that are kind of just referenced in the lower eyelid, coming from the thickness between the top and the inside of your eye. So when I go to do my eyelashes, I kind of see that they start here, and really all it does, see, I'm just kind of putting in a little bit of a thickness here. And if I look closely, I can see I've got a few on the bottom. Not many. They go in different directions. A couple over here. Okay, that's it for that eye. Now, of course, you know, I can shade in to give it some more life. Okay, most of the pupil is going to be a dark value around the highlight. You also notice too that around the edge of the iris is a darker line, right? This edge of the iris usually has a dark, almost a black outline around the edge of the iris. And if your eyes are light, as mine are, okay, my eyes are light, I can see a little bit of variation in value inside there. So these are the highlight areas, and I would just come in, put a little bit of a value scumble, you know, using the side of the pencil if I were just doing this in pencil, just to kind of create some texture up against those areas of highlight. If your eyes are darker, obviously, you could get a little bit darker, that's fine. If you have a brown eye or amber color eyes, they're a little bit darker, mine are green. So that gives me a little bit more accuracy, reality in the look of my eye. And of course now I've got some value in here. I can shade in there, and I have got some shading up against this eye. So I use the side of the pencil and I can shade based on the values that I see here. Okay, so there's one eye. And now I need to look at my other eye. And if you look at the other eye closely, right, look at that. You notice, you see how the curve of this eye line isn't as great on this eye line? So I have more of this iris covered than I do of this one. And that's going to change the shape of this inside corner of my eye also than it is here. It's not a perfect mirror image. So really pay close attention to see if one of your eye shapes, your upper eyelid shapes, is different than the other. I definitely have a very different upper eyelid crease and upper eyelid shape than I do on my left eye as I do on my right. So I need to be careful of that when I go ahead and get set up for drawing this. I'm going to do the same thing I did on this one for the other eye. But, you know, so I'm going to start with the true shape circle. What's the width? And then I'm going to look at the shape of the upper eyelid. And again, this one's a little bit flatter than the curve on this. So I'm going to then look at the shape lightly and start blocking it in from there. Okay, so that's the eyes.